Dahlia Morgan, the leasing agent called out, clipboard in hand, as Dahlia stepped into the marble-floored lobby that smelled like lemon polish and money. "That's me," she said, brushing a damp curl from her forehead and adjusting the strap of her worn leather bag. She hadn't expected the apartment viewing to feel like walking into a luxury hotel. But here she was, 5 minutes early and already wildly out of her depth. Her sneakers squeaked against the floor as she followed the agent toward the elevator with mirrored walls and gold trim. "This one's a corporate-owned unit," the agent explained. "Recently renovated, the owners, particular about tenants." Dahlia raised a brow. "Particular how? Just likes to know who's living in his properties. He's hands-on, might even pop by during the lease process." "Great." A micromanaging landlord. Just what she needed. She'd only come to see the place because her current rental was being sold, and she was desperate to find somewhere near her job at the gallery that didn't require sharing walls with a neighbor who played the drums at midnight. The listing had looked too good to be true open floor plan. Balcony, downtown location, and her gut told her there had to be a catch. She didn't expect the catch to be 6'2" with a jaw like a movie star and eyes the color of stormy skies. When the elevator doors slid open on the penthouse level, Dahlia stepped out and came face to face with a man in a crisp black button-down, sleeves rolled up, leaning casually against the doorframe of the apartment. "Hi," he said, voice low and smooth. "You must be Dahlia." She blinked. "Yes," he held out a hand. "Nolan Carrigan, I own the building." "Oh, of course he did." Dahlia shook his hand, trying not to stare. Up close, he looked like he'd walked out of a GQ magazine expensive watch, faint stubble, and that calm confidence rich men always seem to have. He didn't wear his wealth like it was loud. He wore it like it was stitched into his DNA. "Nice to meet you," she said, suddenly wishing she'd worn literally anything besides old jeans and a paint-smudged tee. "Come on in," Nolan said, stepping aside. The agent stayed behind, clearly knowing she wasn't needed. Inside, the apartment was even more stunning than the photos. Massive windows flooded the space with natural light, highlighting the sleek hardwood floors and minimalist furniture. "This is beautiful," Dahlia said, walking toward the kitchen island with its marble countertop and matte black fixtures. "Glad you think so," Nolan said, watching her with unreadable eyes. "I renovated it myself." She turned. "Seriously," he nodded. "I flip properties on the side. This one, though, I kept." Something about it felt different. Dahlia glanced around. "You live here?" "No," he said, folding his arms. "But I come by when I feel like getting away from the office. It's quiet." She walked to the sliding glass doors and stepped onto the balcony. The view took her breath away, city skyline glittering in the afternoon sun. "You work in the arts," Nolan said behind her. She turned. "How do you know that?" "Your application." "Gallery assistant." "You curate?" "Technically, I'm the assistant to the assistant curator," she said, a little embarrassed. "But yeah, that's the goal." He stepped out beside her. "Creative souls tend to do well here. The last tenant was a writer." Dahlia looked at him. "So what exactly are you looking for in a tenant?" He met her gaze. "Someone who respects the space, pays on time, doesn't set off the fire alarm with incense." She laughed, couldn't help it. "Noted," he smiled. It was the kind of smile that made her stomach flutter, and she hated that it did. "Look," she said, suddenly nervous. "I probably can't afford this. The listing said the price was negotiable, but I set the listing price to see who'd apply," he interrupted. "It's negotiable for the right person. I can have the office call you with details." She narrowed her eyes. "Why me?" "You're honest," he said simply. "And you didn't pretend to be someone you're not. So you're the type who screens tenants personally? I'm the type who likes to know where my money goes, and who lives in spaces I put my time into." She swallowed. "Right." The silence stretched a little too long. "I'll let you finish looking around," Nolan said, stepping back inside. "Take your time." Dahlia wandered the rest of the unit slowly, heart racing. She didn't understand why her pulse hadn't settled since she'd met him. It wasn't just that he was attractive. It was the way he looked at her like he saw something she didn't even know she was showing. 2 days later, she got the call. "You're approved." the leasing agent said. Nolan dropped the price, said you're a perfect fit. Dahlia sat on her bed, stunned. Wait, seriously? Lease is ready for signing. He wants to go over it with you in person, of course he did. The next afternoon, she found herself back in the penthouse, sitting at the island while Nolan poured 2 glasses of wine. You didn't have to, she said. I wanted to, he replied, handing her a glass, to celebrate. Celebrate me giving you rent money, he chuckled. Celebrate good instincts, she sipped, cheeks warm. I still don't get it. You could have rented this place to anyone. I could have, he said, eyes meeting hers. But I didn't want to. The air between them shifted. I don't usually do this, she said quietly. Do what? Drink wine with building owners or feel like this around them? He leaned in, voice lower now. Like what? She hesitated. Like I'm in trouble. His smile faded, gaze serious. You're not in trouble, Dahlia. You just walked into something you didn't expect. She looked at him. And what's that? His hand brushed hers on the counter. Something real. She didn't move, didn't breathe. He leaned back, the moment breaking with a blink. I'll have the papers ready in a minute, he said, standing. As he walked away, Dahlia stared down at her wine glass, heart thudding. She'd come here to review a lease. She hadn't expected to feel like she'd just stepped into something dangerous and impossible to walk away from. The lease burned a hole in her bag the entire subway ride home. Dahlia paced her apartment, biting her thumbnail as she stared at the fresh stack of papers on her coffee table. Signed. Official. Her name on the dotted line of a lease most people in her income bracket would never even get to tour. She didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, she woke to an email from Nolan's office. A building concierge would meet her with the key. Move-in support would be available if she needed it. The tone was professional, but her stomach tightened anyway. By noon, she'd packed everything she owned into a borrowed van, and by late afternoon, she stood at the threshold of her new home 23 floors above the chaos of the street, holding a silver key in her hand that felt heavier than it should. She let herself in slowly, absorbing the silence, the scent of fresh wood and something faintly citrus. There were small touches she hadn't noticed before. A pale ceramic vase near the window, a stack of art books on the coffee table. And in the kitchen, a bottle of wine with a note tucked under it. Thought you might like something to celebrate with. And she stared at the note for a long time before setting it aside. She didn't open the wine. 3 days passed in a blur of unpacking, adjusting to the quiet, and trying to ignore the way the place didn't feel like hers yet. The gallery was preparing for a new exhibit, and Dahlia threw herself into late nights and early mornings, grateful for the distraction. Then, on Friday evening, she found herself alone in the elevator, heading up after a long day, her fingertips stained with charcoal from helping prep a mixed-media installation. When the doors opened, she nearly walked straight into Nolan. He stood in the hallway, phone in one hand, jacket slung over his shoulder. Didn't expect to bump into you, he said, stepping aside. I live here now. Bumping into me is a risk you're going to have to accept. He let out a quiet laugh. Fair point, she eyed him. You always visit your properties unannounced. Only the ones I care about. The hallway light caught the edge of his jaw, highlighting the faint shadow of evening scruff. He didn't look like someone who spent his evenings reviewing spreadsheets. Were you coming to see me? She asked, immediately regretting how direct it sounded. He didn't flinch. I was. She tilted her head. Why? Nolan hesitated, then shifted his weight. There's a dinner tomorrow night, private, gallery donors, collectors, a few artists. I was invited. Thought you might want to come, she blinked. You know people in the art world? I fund a few residencies. I sit on a couple of boards. Of course he did. I don't exactly own a gown, she said, adjusting the strap of her messenger bag. It's not black tie, he said. But if you want something new, I can send someone over. She stared at him. You're offering to buy me a dress. I'm offering to cover whatever makes you feel like you belong in that room. Something in her bristled. I'm not ashamed of how I dress. I didn't say you should be, he said quietly, but I also know what it's like to walk into a room and feel like you have to earn your place. She didn't respond right away. The elevator behind her pinged shut. I'll think about it, she finally said. I'll have someone reach out with details. He turned to leave but paused. I wasn't planning on inviting anyone, he said over his shoulder. But then I remembered how you looked at that balcony view, like it mattered. And then he was gone. Saturday arrived too fast. Dahlia stood in front of her mirror, smoothing the hem of the silky midnight blue dress that had arrived that morning in a box with no receipt and no tag. It fit perfectly. Too perfectly. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, a driver in a tailored black suit greeted her. Mr. Carrigan is waiting downstairs. She nodded, heart thudding. The car was sleek, black, and so quiet inside it felt like gliding. Nolan sat beside her in a dark jacket, no tie, shirt collar open. He didn't look at her right away. You clean up well, he said eventually. So do you. The ride was short, the event held in a townhouse that looked like it belonged in a European capital. Inside, the air buzzed with low hums of conversation and clinks of crystal. Nolan kept a hand at her back, guiding her through rooms filled with people who moved like they'd never had to worry about a late rent payment in their lives. He introduced her only once to an older woman in a gold cuff bracelet who'd curated a recent exhibit at the Met. This is Dahlia Morgan. She's going to change the way this city sees emerging artists. The curator smiled, interested. Are you showing yet? Dahlia swallowed. Not yet. You will, Nolan said before she could say more. Sooner than you think. She didn't know what stunned her more, the certainty in his voice or the way it made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't wrong. Later, as they stepped out onto the townhouse terrace, Dahlia leaned against the railing and exhaled. You didn't have to sell me like that, she said quietly. I didn't sell you, he replied. I told the truth. She looked at him. You barely know me, I know enough. The sound of the city below seemed distant, muffled by the night. She turned to face him fully. You say things like that and I don't know what to do with them. Then don't do anything, he said. Just hear them. He moved closer, gaze steady. I've seen hundreds of people walk through that apartment, he said, but I've never wanted to open the door for any of them. Her breath caught. And now, she asked, now I want to see what happens if I do. They stood there, the space between them charged and impossibly fragile. Dahlia didn't answer, but she didn't step away either. Dahlia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse the next morning, barefoot, coffee in hand, and utterly incapable of focusing on anything other than the memory of the night before. Nolan hadn't kissed her. He hadn't even touched her apart from a brief hand on her lower back, which had felt more grounding than possessive. And yet, she couldn't stop replaying his words on that terrace, how he'd looked at her like she wasn't just a tenant or some passing interest, but something he hadn't expected to find. She told herself she needed to get out of the apartment, clear her head. Maybe sketch for a bit, go to the park, anywhere but here. But when she reached for her bag, she found a pale envelope tucked beneath it, with her name written in clean, deliberate handwriting. Inside was a single card. The gallery's private preview is tonight. I'd like you to come with me. No signature, but it didn't need one. She stared at it for a long moment before she exhaled and reached for her phone to call into the gallery. Something's come up, she said. I won't be in this evening. The preview was held at a converted warehouse in Tribeca, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and dramatic lighting that made everything look more intentional. Nolan met her at the car as it pulled up, this time in a charcoal suit, no tie and a subtle tension in his jaw she hadn't seen before. This is different, she said as they walked toward the entrance. I know, he replied. You'll see why. Inside, the space was buzzing with anticipation. But it wasn't until they turned a corner into the main gallery that Dahlia truly understood. The center installation was a massive suspended sculpture wire, glass and light shimmering like broken constellations frozen mid-collapse. Below it, on a low pedestal, sat a framed sketch. Her sketch. The one she'd done in college before her mother got sick. She hadn't seen it in years, her breath caught. How did I bought it, Nolan said quietly. From the estate sale last month, she turned to him, stunned. You went to that? I didn't know it was yours when I saw it. I just knew I had to have it. Later, I found your initials." He paused. "I asked around. One of the former tenants of that building recognized your name." Dahlia stepped closer to the pedestal, her throat tightening. "This drawing was the last thing I finished before everything fell apart. I thought it was gone." "I didn't bring you here to impress you," Nolan said behind her. "I brought you because I thought you deserved to see your work in a room like this." She turned slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you keep doing this?" "Doing what?" "Showing up in these huge, impossible ways. You don't even know me that well." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Maybe not. But I know what it feels like to have something you built, something you loved, slip through your fingers. And I know what it's like to want to believe in something again." She didn't respond. Couldn't. Her heart felt full and fractured all at once. They walked through the rest of the exhibit in silence, side by side, but not touching. When they returned to the car, he opened the door for her without a word. Only once they were inside, the city lights flickering past the tinted windows, did he speak again. "You're not a project, Dahlia. I never said I was. But I don't want you thinking this is about guilt or charity or power." He turned to her. "I've spent years building things, buildings, companies. I've made a lot of money doing it, but none of it ever made me feel the way I do when I see you walk into a room." She stared at him, stunned. "I don't want to rewrite your life," he said. "I want to be a part of it." "If you'll let me," she swallowed hard. "You're not what I expected." He gave a soft laugh. "You either." "I don't know what this is yet," she said. "I don't even know what I want it to be." "That's okay," he said gently. "I'm not going anywhere." The car slowed outside the building. Nolan stepped out first and extended his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Upstairs, she set her keys down with shaking fingers. He lingered by the door, waiting. "I don't usually invite people in," she said. "I know. But I want you to." He stepped inside without hesitation. Nothing about the evening was rushed. He didn't touch her until she was standing in front of him, eyes searching his. Then his hands came to her face, and she leaned into the kiss like it was something she'd been waiting for without realizing. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't even perfect. But it was real. Later, as they lay on the couch in the dim light, quiet between them, she rested her head on his chest. "I don't know how to trust this," she murmured. "You don't have to yet," he said. "I'll earn it." She closed her eyes, heart aching in a way that felt terrifying and good all at once. Because something was shifting. Something had already shifted, and she wasn't sure there was any way to go back. Dahlia hadn't expected the rooftop garden. She found it 3 days later tucked behind an unmarked door off the penthouse hallway, past a stairwell she hadn't noticed before. The wind carried the scent of lavender and rosemary, and the skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass railing. Someone had placed string lights between the planters, soft and golden, and a small wrought iron table stood in the corner. 2 chairs positioned to face the setting sun. She stood there for a long while, her tote bag sliding off her shoulder, fingers grazing the petals of a blooming white camellia. The garden didn't match the sleek minimalism of the apartment. It was warm, wild in places. Unapologetically alive, when Nolan's voice spoke behind her, she didn't jump. "I was hoping you'd find it." She turned slightly. "Yours," he nodded, stepping closer. "I started building it the year after my father passed. Didn't know a thing about gardening. Just knew I needed something that kept me grounded." She looked at him, quiet for a moment. "You don't talk about your family." "There's not much to say." "I think there is." He took a breath, gaze drifting to the skyline. "He was a contractor, small time, built houses upstate, taught me how to lay tile before I could tie a tie." Dahlia leaned against the railing. "And your mother?" "She left when I was 8, didn't look back." She hesitated. "That's hard." "I learned early the difference between people who stay and people who don't." Dahlia glanced at him. "Is that why you build things that last?" He looked at her then, something raw in his expression. "Maybe." They stood in silence, the city glowing beneath them. Finally, she reached out, threading her fingers through his. "I want to show you something," she said. He followed her back through the apartment, barefoot now, the sound of the evening hushed around them. She led him to the second bedroom, still mostly empty except for a canvas she'd propped against the wall the night before. It was unfinished, but the lines were bold, confident. A skyline wrapped in tangled vines, ink and charcoal, and the faintest wash of color. Nolan studied it, his brow furrowed. "You've never shown me this." "I didn't plan to, but it's the first thing I've drawn in over a year that doesn't feel like I'm chasing something." He stepped closer. "It's alive." "I think it's because of you," she said softly. "You made me believe in things again." "In myself." He turned toward her. "You did that, I just gave you space." She rested her hand on his chest. "It was never about the apartment." "No," he said. "It never was." The next morning, she found a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter, her name written across the top in bold pen. Inside, a single sentence: "Come downstairs tonight. Bring your sketchbook." She waited all day with her nerves twisted tight. When the sun dipped behind the buildings, she took the elevator down, sketchbook in hand, heart in her throat. The doors opened to a transformed lobby. Gone were the polished silence and sterile lighting. In their place stood a long white table covered in candles, a bouquet of wildflowers, two place settings, and Nolan. He wore no jacket this time. Just a soft gray shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and an expression that held none of his usual restraint. "You did all this." "I wanted to create something for you," he said. "For once." She stepped forward, eyes wide. "Why?" "Because you woke something up in me. Something I forgot I'd buried." The candles flickered between them. Dahlia set her sketchbook on the table and met his gaze. "Tell me the truth," she said. "What's happening here?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm falling in love with you." Her breath caught. "I know it's fast," he added. "But I've never looked at someone and seen the rest of my life until you." She reached for his hand across the table. "I don't want to run from this." He stepped around the table and cupped her face gently, brushing a thumb over her cheek. "Then don't," he whispered. She kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that rewrote the rules, that shattered whatever walls were still standing between them. Later, as they sat together beneath the candlelight, her sketchbook open in her lap, he watched as she began to draw again his profile in quick, certain lines. "I want to stay," she whispered. "You already are," he said. Weeks passed, and the apartment felt less like borrowed space and more like home. The gallery offered her an assistant curator position after an anonymous donation funded a new wing. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Nolan didn't just love her with words. He showed her in 1,000 ways coffee waiting in the morning, a quiet glance across a crowded room, a rooftop garden that now bloomed in full color. One evening, as the city hummed below and the sky turned to velvet, he took her hand and led her to the balcony. "I bought the brownstone on 5th, he said, her eyes widened. "Why?" "Because it has the perfect light for a studio and a garden like the one upstairs. I thought maybe we could build something there together." She turned toward him, heart pounding. "I never imagined any of this," she said. "Neither did I," he replied, "but I'm not letting it go." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin velvet box. She covered her mouth as he opened it, a simple gold ring with a single stone, elegant, timeless. "I'm not asking for a perfect answer," he said. "I'm just asking for forever." Her voice trembled. "Yes." The city lit up around them, but all she could see was him. And just like that, what began as a lease agreement became the beginning of the rest of her life with the man who'd once been just a name on a door. Now he was her home. Her future. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was standing on borrowed ground. She was exactly where she was meant to be. Rain tapped softly against the penthouse windows as Dahlia pulled the last of her canvases from storage. The apartment was quiet. Save for the low hum of jazz playing from the vintage turntable Nolan had surprised her with 2 weeks ago. She had finally accepted that nothing about their life together was ordinary, not the way he loved her. Not the way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in any room. And certainly not the way he made even rainy Sundays feel like something out of a dream. She was finishing the edges of a new piece when Nolan walked in from the hallway, sleeves rolled halfway up and a newspaper tucked under one arm. "You're painting again," he said as he stepped into the studio space they'd carved out in the corner of the open floor plan. "I haven't stopped since the rooftop dinner," she said, not looking up from her brushwork. "It's like I can finally breathe again, like everything in me that was stuck finally snapped loose." Nolan leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "You know, when I first bought this place, I thought I'd never bring anyone here. It was too personal, too untouched. I didn't want to ruin it with anything temporary." She paused, then turned to face him. "And now I want to paint the walls with you. Fill the rooms with books and dinner parties and arguments about where the best sushi in the city is. I want to mess it all up with you." She walked over, slipping her arms around his waist. "You really think we'll argue about sushi? I've seen the way you talk about that hole-in-the-wall spot in Queens. It's only a matter of time." She laughed, resting her cheek against his chest. "I love that you know that." He kissed the top of her head. "I love that you let me." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Nolan stepped away to answer, revealing a deliveryman holding a long, flat package wrapped in brown paper. "For Miss Morgan," the man said, handing it over with a clipboard. Dahlia frowned and signed for it, then carefully peeled back the wrapping. Inside was a single, large-frame gallery flyer, printed on thick stock, announcing a solo debut for an emerging artist, Dahlia Morgan. Below, in smaller print, was the gallery's name, followed by a list of sponsors, including the Carrigan Foundation. She looked up, stunned. "You didn't," Nolan raised his hands. "I didn't go behind your back. I just sent them your portfolio. The rest was all them. They were impressed." "They said yes before I even finished the email." She stared at the flyer, speechless. "You're ready," he said gently, "and I'm not the only one who sees it. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He stepped forward, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just want you to know that I'm here, for all of it. The nerves, the late nights, the paint on the floor. I want to be the person you come home to no matter what happens." "You are," she whispered. "You already are." They spent the evening curled on the couch, her sketchbook forgotten on the table, the rain turning heavier outside. Nolan read while she traced lazy circles on his forearm, her thoughts already drifting to the pieces she'd submit for the exhibit. It didn't feel like pressure. It felt like possibility. 2 months later, the gallery buzzed with energy, the air thick with anticipation. Dahlia stood near the entrance in a sleek emerald dress Nolan had chosen for her, her curls pinned up with gold combs. Every wall in the main room held one of her pieces, framed and lit like they belonged there. She spotted her former boss across the room, deep in conversation with a reporter from a national arts magazine. She also saw the curator from the Met, who raised her glass in silent salute. But all she could focus on was Nolan. He moved through the crowd with effortless ease, greeting donors and fellow board members, but his eyes returned to her every few minutes as if to anchor himself. As if to say, "This is yours. I'm just lucky to be here." She walked up to him as the crowd thinned near the back of the room. "You made this happen," she said. "No," he replied. "You did. I just made sure the right doors stayed open. I don't think I'll ever stop being surprised by you." "I hope not," he teased. "That's half the fun." She took his hand. "Come with me." They stepped outside onto the gallery's private terrace, the city glowing below like a living constellation. She turned to him, heart suddenly full to the point of aching. "I want all of it," she said. "The studio, the dinner parties. The arguments about sushi. I want the life we talked about." "You have it," he said. "You've had it since the moment you walked into that penthouse and looked around like you belonged." "I didn't feel like I did back then." "You do now," she nodded. "I do, because it's mine. Because you gave me the space to build something in it." He stepped closer, pulling a slim box from his pocket. Her breath caught as he opened it, not another ring, but a key. It was antique gold worn at the edges. "What's this?" "The brownstones finished," he said. "Move-in ready." "I was going to wait until after the exhibit, but I figured tonight was already perfect. Might as well make it unforgettable." She took the key, fingers trembling. "You want us to live there?" I want us to start everything there, tears welled in her eyes. Then yes. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her as the city hummed around them, the wind lifting the hem of her dress like something out of a fairy tale. 6 months later, the brownstone was full of life. Dahlia's studio took up the entire 3rd floor, filled with canvases in every stage of creation. Nolan often worked from home, his office just down the hall, where he'd occasionally wander in with coffee and a kiss, pretending not to be impressed by her progress. They hosted their first dinner party in the spring, string lights glowing in the back garden Nolan had rebuilt from scratch. Dahlia's parents came down from upstate, her father marveling at how the house felt like something out of a novel. Friends from the gallery filled the space with laughter and stories, and for the first time in years, Dahlia felt completely rooted, completely seen. One night, as they lay in bed beneath the open windows, the city soft outside, Nolan brushed his fingers down her spine. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come to that showing?" "All the time," she said. "I almost skipped it." "Then I would have found another way," he murmured. "I would have kept the apartment empty until you walked in." She smiled, eyes drifting shut. "You really believe in fate?" "No," he said. "I believe in you." They fell asleep like that, tangled in each other, the stars hidden behind the clouds but no less real, and for the first time in either of their lives, everything felt exactly right.